Emma, get your coat now.
Aunt Carol, what's going on?
Just grab it, sweetie. We need to go to the hospital. Your mom she's with the baby.
The baby? But she's not due for months. I once believed my family was the very definition of peace. We lived in Edgewood, a small lakeside town in northern Wisconsin where winters were blanketed in snow, and everyone called each other by name even if they'd only met once. As a child, I was an only daughter, Emma Wilson, living a simple but warm life. My dad was a high school physics teacher, my mom worked night shifts as a nurse at the county hospital, and although we weren't wealthy, we never lacked anything truly important: presence and affection. On summer evenings, the whole family would sit on the old swing in front of the porch, eating vanilla ice cream bought from the small store 3 blocks away, listening to the cicadas sing like nameless music. Mom would brush my hair before heading off to work the night shift, and Dad would take me fishing every Saturday morning. Life back then was like an indie film screened at Sundance, not extravagant, but filled with emotion. Until that night, the night when snow fell endlessly, as if the sky was trying to bury everything beneath a sheet of white frost. I had just turned 8. Headlights flashed through the window, followed by urgent knocking that startled me awake. And from that moment, I could never return to my old life. Aunt Carol, my mom's sister, was the one who walked in. Her face pale, lips tightly pressed as if holding back a secret. I was taken away in haste, with barely an explanation beyond the phrase, "The baby came early, very early." At that age, premature birth sounded as foreign as another planet. I only knew that someone new was arriving and changing the axis of my small world. When we got to the hospital, I saw my mom, haggard face, eyes red from sleepless worry. Beside her was a glass incubator with wires plugged into a tiny, purplish-red creature. The newborn baby sister, I was told, would be called Ellie. I reached out to touch the glass, but my mom brushed me away. "Don't, Emma. The baby is very weak. She can't risk an infection." Her voice was cold as ice, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. But I was too young to understand. All I knew was that I had just lost something, without anyone having the time to explain what it was. After Ellie was brought home, everything changed as if I had stepped into a sci-fi movie titled Hospital at Home. Everywhere there were sanitizers, air purifiers, alcohol wipes, and signs that read, "Do not enter if coughing." The living room, once where I played with Lego sets, had now become a mini intensive care unit for the baby. I was only allowed in if I had showered, changed clothes, and, crucially, not made a single cough. At first, I thought I was lucky, because every time I coughed, I was sent to Grandma's. There were crisp apple pies, old comic books, and a vintage oak tea cabinet I liked to lean against. But gradually, I began to understand I wasn't sent away out of love. I was pushed out like a risk-needing isolation. Once, I brought home a perfect score on a math test, bursting with pride. When I handed the paper to my mom, she glanced at it briefly and then turned to ask my dad, "Did you get tissues for Ellie?" Her nose is runny again. And Dad? He just said one sentence. "Good job." No smile, no hug, no proud eyes. Everything I did slowly became background noise in a world where only Ellie's soft breathing mattered. No matter how many pretty drawings I made, how many speech contests I won, how many books I read, everything was swallowed by the familiar chant, "Ellie needs rest." Someone once said, "Children don't need much to be happy. They just need to be seen." But when that loving gaze disappears, a child learns to shrink herself. So did I. I learned to disappear. My room always smelled of peppermint oil, something Ellie was allergic to, as if it were my silent barricade to preserve the only space not yet taken. There I turned to classic paintings, old objects that I imagined once had a soul, a history worth telling. And in that silent world, I began to develop a strange intuition. I could tell when something seemingly worthless was, in fact, a hidden treasure. Perhaps it was precisely at the moment I was forgotten that I began learning how to truly see the value in small things, including myself. I don't know the exact moment when I realized I was no longer an important part of that house. Maybe it was the time I stood silently by the doorway, an honor student certificate in hand, while my mother walked past me as if I were just a piece of furniture. Maybe it was that morning when Ellie sneezed and the whole family rushed to her in a panic, while I, just a single cough, was thrown out of the house like a virus bomb. But perhaps, deeper than that, it was when I began to clearly see myself as invisible. My achievements were no longer stuck to the fridge, but folded away in a drawer. The solar system presentation I had practiced for an entire week, with a handmade rotating model and blinking LED lights, was only watched by my mom for 10 seconds before she nodded. Yes, I know, but Ellie is sleeping. And so I learned a simple but bitter lesson. Don't disturb. I don't blame Ellie. She didn't choose to be born weak. I used to watch her sleep peacefully under the thin knitted blanket Grandma had made, her tiny chest rising and falling weakly. There were nights I sat outside her room, listening to her wheezing breath. And even though I was considered a contagion risk, I still worried about her. But what I couldn't understand was why taking care of one child had to mean abandoning the other. I had tried everything. Made birthday gifts for Mom out of cardboard and dried flowers pressed in my notebook. Cleaned the house without being asked. Even learned to cook from YouTube videos to help Dad prepare dinner when Mom was tired. But all those efforts were always swallowed by Ellie's shadow, the child who needed priority. When I entered 8th grade, a small but vital change occurred. I was accepted into the gifted student program. Mom wasn't surprised. She just told the neighbors, "My Emma is very smart. She's independent, never needs anyone to worry." I overheard that from the top of the stairs, and strangely, for the first time, I didn't feel proud. I felt empty. Independent doesn't mean not needing love. Smart doesn't mean not needing a hug. At that time, I began to feel that the language they used to praise me was actually a set of boxes burying my emotions. They called me mature because I didn't whine, called me reliable because I knew how to stay quiet. But no one asked if I was okay. And I, a 13-year-old child, began to swallow emotions like bitter pills. Not because I liked it, but because no one offered me water to wash them down. That same year, I found a place I never expected would change my life. Maple Crust Bakery on the town's main avenue. Foggy glass doors, a weathered sign, but every time I walked past, the scent of butter and cinnamon filled the air. One autumn afternoon, I walked in and asked, "Can I work here after school? I don't need a high salary." The owner was an elderly woman with silver hair named Lorraine. She looked at me with an expression I wasn't used to, an expression that truly saw me. "Do you want to wipe tables or wash baking trays?" she joked. I nodded, eyes steady. She placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "If you do good work, you'll find your place in this world. No need to be loud." And that was the first time in years I heard something that wasn't a reminder about Ellie. From that day on, after school, I would run to the bakery, tie my hair back with a fabric ribbon, and begin a new rhythm of life. I learned how to wipe cups so there were no water stains, how to arrange cookies in perfect order, how to talk to customers gently without trembling. There, I was acknowledged for my presence, not for Ellie's absence. And at home? No one asked where I went. No one questioned why I came back late. As long as I didn't wake Ellie, didn't mess with the clean air, I could quietly exist like a ghost. But it was within that silence that I began to redefine my own worth. No one taught me that. No book recorded it. But I understood that if no one would see me, then I would have to start seeing myself. And I did. Through sweet pastries, through the soft yellow light at the cashier counter, and through the first time someone said my name, not because they needed me to step aside. I once heard someone say, "If you're not invited to the table, bring your own chair." But in the world I grew up in, I wasn't just uninvited. I didn't even know where the table was, and no one ever told me I had the right to find a chair. So I began building my own table. The high school years passed by like a silent film. While my friends talked about their vacations in Florida or the new phones their parents bought them, I would just smile and nod, hiding my bakery work schedule in the pocket of my coat. Every night when I got home, I studied at the small desk in the corner of my room, the only space that hadn't been sterilized to the point of losing all signs of life. There, the soft yellow desk lamp and the ticking of the clock were my only companions. No one asked me where I went, what I did, or whether I was tired. I'd grown used to that. Silence had become a language I learned to survive. No asking, no expecting, no bothering anyone. But I kept moving forward. In my senior year of high school, I began searching for scholarships. I knew one thing for sure. If I wanted to escape from Edgewood, I would have to open the door and step out myself because no one was going to lead me. I was given an old laptop from Maple Crust Bakery as a Christmas gift from Ms. Lorraine. Old but still runs well, just like you, she joked. I brought it home like a treasure. During baking breaks, I'd sit by the bakery window, open the laptop, and start writing applications. I rewrote every story of mine into essays. Not pitiful, not complaining, but truthful words written in the voice of someone who had never given up. Ms. Lorraine reviewed every line. Write with your heart, not just your head, she always reminded me. I applied to 12 universities, from within Wisconsin to the far East Coast, where there were old buildings and libraries I had only seen in books. I didn't tell my mom nor my dad. Not because I was hiding it, but because I knew. They wouldn't ask. One early spring night, as I was wiping down the bakery counter like usual, a new email notification popped up on the laptop. Northwestern University. I read the subject line, my heart pounding. My hands trembled as I opened the message, but my eyes stayed dry as I reached the final line. Congratulations, you've received a full scholarship. I stood frozen in the bakery, surrounded by the sweet smell of butter cookies, and cried for the first time in years. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time, someone, even if it was just a faraway admissions committee, had told me I was worthy. Ms. Lorraine stepped out from the kitchen and hugged me tightly, as if I were her own granddaughter. You see, she whispered, those who walk in silence often reach the farthest. That night, I brought the letter home and placed it on the dinner table while my mother was cutting fruit for Ellie. I got accepted into Northwestern with a full scholarship, I said. My mother looked up, nodded slightly. Good, but don't tell Ellie. She's stressed about her dance performance next week. Then she continued slicing the orange, as if I had just announced I was chosen as class vice president. I wasn't angry. I just folded the letter, slipped it into my pocket, and went upstairs. Downstairs, Ellie giggled over her new ballet shoes, the kind I never even dreamed of owning. A few weeks later, the whole family held a small celebration because Ellie had won second place in a school art contest. Dad bought a glass frame and hung the drawing on the living room wall with a little plaque that read, "The Family's Talent." It was a pink cat standing on a rainbow. I looked at the drawing, then back at the essay I had written, the one a university professor once called a highlight beyond expectation. The essay still sat in a drawer, unread by anyone in the house. I wasn't sad, truly. Because this time, I knew I had the key to leave. I chose to major in art history not just out of passion, but because it was the first time I got to decide something for myself. No one dismissed it, no one interfered. And above all, I made a silent promise to myself. One day, I will become someone who can no longer be ignored. And I had already begun, from within the silence. I walked into my college lecture hall with an old backpack, a few neatly packed clothes, and one single belief. Everything I had ever lacked, I would create for myself. Northwestern was unlike any place I had ever known. The gray stone buildings, the students who spoke in phrases like academic fellowship and cross-disciplinary research. This was a world I had only seen on screens, and now I was living in it. But that strangeness didn't scare me. On the contrary, I felt as if I had just set foot on the promised land. Here, no one knew I was the girl pushed aside because of a premature sister. Here I was Emma Wilson, art history major, the girl who had earned a full scholarship, the one professors called on in the middle of class just to ask about a sentence in her essay. No more, careful, Ellie is sleeping. No more, don't make noise. Just the sound of lecture bells and discussions about Baroque art and Edwardian jewelry. I spent hours in the library. Faded old books, forgotten sketches, all of them spoke to me in a language only someone who had been overlooked could understand. I saw myself in those aged items, silent, valuable, and waiting for the right gaze to be recognized. In my sophomore year, I landed an unpaid internship at a small jewelry appraisal firm in Chicago. Most of my friends chose big media or finance companies, places with shiny ID badges and free lunches. Me? I took the train for nearly an hour every day, stepped into a small room on the third floor of an old building, wore white gloves, held a magnifying glass, and meticulously noted down every tiny scratch on a ring. No one praised me for getting it right. No cameras recorded each moment. But I knew, right there, I was starting to build a path no one could trample and call help. One late afternoon in autumn, I picked up a brooch labeled costume jewelry, about $30. Small, nothing special at first glance. But the engraving was far too intricate, and the enamel still glossy after decades. I turned it over, a small, nearly faded maker's mark. Strange. My heart raced. I researched all night. Eventually, I discovered it was the mark of a French artisan who had once crafted jewelry for nobility before World War II. I presented my findings at a team meeting, bringing comparison documents, illustrative images, and evidence from a museum database. The brooch was then reappraised at a starting value of $12,000. When it went up for auction at an event in Seattle, it sold for over $40,000. That was the first time the name Emma Wilson appeared in an internal email with a short compliment. Sharp eye. I didn't brag, didn't post it online, didn't call home. In fact, I wasn't even sure my mother remembered where I was interning. The last time she called, it was just to ask, "Can you send an extra $200 this month? Ellie's ballet lessons are adding up." I nodded, transferred the money, then bent back over my appraisal report. I gradually became a familiar name among those known for finding treasure in overlooked junk. Another time, it was a necklace dismissed as fake cloisonné, which turned out to be an authentic piece from 19th century Russia. Another time, a platinum wedding ring thought to be generic turned out to be a limited design, with only a few pieces left in the world. I was assigned more work. One day, my supervisor, Ms. Margaret, invited me to lunch. After slicing a tart, she asked, "Emma, have you ever thought about starting your own firm?" I laughed, thinking she was joking. "I've worked unpaid for 2 years, live on instant noodles, rent a place with peeling walls. What chance do I have?" She tilted her head, her eyes brightened. "Exactly because you have nothing, you're not afraid of losing anything. The hungriest ones find the rarest meals." That sentence struck deep into the core of what I believed. All those years, I thought I was invisible. But in truth, I was just learning to clearly see what others had overlooked. I began accepting small side jobs, from pawn shops, family-owned antique stores, to elderly folks wanting to verify old wedding rings. No one knew I was a student. They just knew. The girl with deep brown hair, gloved hands, and eyes sharp as an X-ray. My name wasn't on the news, not trending online. But the stones I touched were beginning to find their true light. And so was I. I founded my own company in the fall of my 27th year, with no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no congratulations from family, and no one to cut the ribbon but myself. The company's name was Aurum and Iris. Aurum is Latin for gold, and Iris was the flower my mother used to grow in front of our house, back when I was still the only child who got her hair brushed every night. Later, Mom got so busy taking care of Ellie that no one even remembered what the garden used to smell like. But I didn't forget. The first office was just over 300 square feet on the 3rd floor of an old building in Milwaukee. Below was an Italian cafe, fragrant with almond pastries and espresso. Next door was a dental clinic long closed. I bought a wobbly old wooden desk with one broken leg, propped it up with a file box. The creaky swivel chair was salvaged from the curb, which I cleaned myself with alcohol, and the desk lamp was a discount find at a flea market. Every time I turned it on, the bulb clicked like it was doubting my dream. But I believed in that dream, because I was the only one who had no choice but to make it real. I didn't have a big capital, no billboard, no one backing me. But I had a reputation I had quietly built over 5 years through patience, precise knowledge, and an intuition no textbook could teach. I started with small clients. An elderly lady wanting to verify her wedding ring from the Great Depression, an heir trying to understand the value of a necklace left by her great-grandmother. I didn't just appraise. I told the story of each item, so they would know that value lies not in the metal, but in the memory. Good words travel far. An antique store called, then an estate lawyer. Soon after, a small museum in a neighboring state asked me to appraise a collection that had never been examined, dating back to the 19th century. I hired my first employee, Maya, a geology graduate with bright eyes and the kind of patience for tiny stones as if they were speaking to her. I taught her how to use a magnifier under filament light, how to distinguish handcrafted fingerprints from mass production, and most importantly, to trust her instincts. 3 years later, Orem and Iris had 3 offices in Milwaukee, Minneapolis, and Denver. I didn't flaunt it. I still drove the old silver SUV, still lived in a small suburban house, and still ate ramen on late work nights. Not because I was poor, but because I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. My family still didn't know a thing. To them, I was still Emma, the stubborn daughter who refused to take a stable job, always rummaging through antiques and coming home late because she was busy dusting something somewhere. My mother still called to talk about Ellie like a living newsletter. She's changed majors for the 4th time now, studying animal behavior psychology. Seems to suit her. My dad occasionally advised, maybe apply to teach high school back home, they're short on staff. I nodded every time like the obedient 13-year-old Emma, even though I had just signed a $400,000 appraisal contract with a national museum. I used to want to say everything. That I was the one sending $7,000 a month for the past 2 years to help my parents pay Ellie's tuition. That the bracelet Mom was wearing was real, worth enough to buy a new car. That the designer bag Ellie bragged about getting on sale was actually a limited edition that never goes on sale. I knew because I had appraised that very piece. But I stayed silent, not out of fear, but because I understood the people who once overlooked you when you were at your smallest will never truly celebrate you when you grow beyond what they imagined. Once, during Sunday dinner, Ellie gave me half a smile and said, "You should get an MBA. Might help with that little antique shop of yours." My mother didn't object. In fact, she nodded approvingly. She's right. Everyone's getting advanced degrees these days. I poured water into my glass, looked up through the slightly fogged window. In my head was the layout design for the new exhibition gallery in New York, the $2.5 million contract I had just signed last week. They didn't need to know. And I didn't need them to. Silence used to hurt me. Now it's the crown I wear without needing anyone to grant it, because in the end, I had become someone who could no longer be ignored, even if no one in my family was perceptive enough to see it. I used to think that if I just stayed long enough, good enough, quiet enough, then eventually someone in the family would turn around, realize it, and say, "Emma, we were wrong." But I was wrong. They didn't realize it. They were just used to living off my presence like an invisible resource, something to use when available, something to miss when gone, but never something they truly valued. Everything started to crack when Ellie, after switching majors for the 5th time, suddenly bought a limited edition BMW sports car and flaunted it on Instagram with the caption, "Hard work pays off." Hard work? I looked at the photo. Designer bag, Cartier watch, a caption dripping with main character energy. And I knew full well she hadn't worked a single day, hadn't completed a single academic program, and definitely couldn't have bought a nearly $100,000 car on her own. That day, my mother called with overwhelming joy in her voice. "Emma, did you see? She's independent now, doesn't need anyone anymore, still managing everything. I'm so proud." I swallowed the bitter laugh caught in my throat. Every month, I still quietly transferred $7,000, labeled as tuition support and never once questioned. I didn't expect a thank you, but hearing them speak as if my efforts had never existed, that hurt more than being forgotten. I had planned to stay silent like always. But then Thanksgiving came. My mom called, sounding weaker than usual. "I'm really tired. No one really has the energy to cook this year. Everyone's counting on you." I paused for a few seconds, then said, "I'll take care of it." Not because I wanted to be involved, but because I wanted to create a dinner that wasn't an obligation, but a choice. I hired a high-end catering service from Chicago, the same company that catered my jewelry auction events. They brought chefs, table designers, portable ovens, and even gold-rimmed porcelain dishes. I paid with my company card. No one knew, and I didn't say anything. Thanksgiving morning, I arrived early. The catering team followed, professional as if preparing a gala for the elite. Ellie glanced over and whispered to Mom, "Who's she trying to impress?" I smiled softly. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted a real meal, not dry turkey and the same old stories about Ellie's education. Dinner went smoothly until I went upstairs to monitor a live auction in Tokyo. A Meiji-era jewelry piece worth nearly $500,000 was closing, and I was the one responsible for authentication. Ellie barged in without knocking, phone charger in hand. "Can I borrow your laptop, just for a bit?" Then she saw the screen, clearly showing the company's bank accounts, financial reports, and a $2.5 million contract. She grabbed the laptop and ran downstairs, holding it up like a trophy. "Look at this. This is what her antique job really is." Silence. Complete. Mom put down her knife. Dad adjusted his glasses. Ellie's mouth hung open. I walked down, took the laptop back, and said slowly but clearly, "It's no one else. I'm the one named on that contract. I'm the CEO of Aurum and Iris, a jewelry appraisal firm with offices in 3 states. And I'm the one who's been sending $7,000 to Mom and Dad every month for the past 2 years." No one spoke. Until Mom, her voice trembling. "You have that kind of money, and let your parents struggle. And your sister, she's still studying." I lifted my head. Ellie's not studying anymore. She's traveling with her boyfriend, wearing fake watches and claiming they're real. And you never once asked where the money came from, you just took it. Ellie burst into tears. "You don't trust me? I'm your sister. Family should share." I nodded. Family should also show respect, not only come around when they need money. I turned to leave. Mom shouted, "You can't do this. Your father and I are counting on you." I didn't turn back. Then it's time for everyone to learn how to stand on their own, just like I did since I was 17. The heavy wooden door closed behind me, like a final period. No one saw me out. No one hugged me. No one said, "Emma, we're proud of you." Just a chilling silence, stretching like years. But within that silence, I was no longer afraid. I had finished the journey of being a shadow. Now I walked in the light I created myself. I came home that evening with a strangely soft click of the door. The apartment was quiet, lit only by the warm glow from the kitchen corner and the steady hum of the heater. I placed my phone on the table, hadn't even taken off my coat yet when the messages began pouring in like a summer thunderstorm in the middle of the night. "Mom, you've messed everything up." "Dad, family isn't something you get to insult." "Ellie, you ruined everything. I never thought you could be this cruel." I placed the phone face down, as if just not looking at it could somehow make it all disappear. But I knew the real wound wasn't in the words. It was in how used I had become to being hurt that way. The next day, the company email began receiving anonymous messages. A relative requested financial support out of family love. An old friend of my mother's sent an email saying I should know better because no one becomes successful alone. And even Ellie's friend, the one who once mocked my career at a party, wrote a piece of advice. "You shouldn't cut off blood ties just because of pride." I didn't reply to anyone. I called Marcus, the lawyer who specialized in estate matters and personal confidentiality, someone I had worked with for years. "We need to clean everything up," I said. "Family?" he asked. "Family, on paper, online." In the system, Marcus didn't ask further. He just nodded. A week later, everyone who had sent a message was blocked. Unfamiliar email addresses were removed from the system, and one final line was added to every legal response. "Love, if it's real, will never come with an invoice." I didn't cry, didn't get angry, I just felt light. Light like I could finally breathe for the first time without worrying if it would bother someone. One evening, when everything was calm, I opened the old wooden box in my bookshelf, the box my grandmother gave me when I was 15. Inside was a necklace with a white pearl shimmering on a faded gold chain. I had kept it not for its material worth, but because it was a reminder that someone in the family once saw me when I was still little. I called her. "I already know," she said before I could say anything. "You don't have to retell it," she continued. "I just wanted you to hear it from me," I said. She was silent for a moment, then slowly, with that familiar warm tone. "Emma, real love doesn't bind, it frees. You've lived in the shadow of conditional family ties. Now you've stepped into the light. And that's not selfish. That's being true." I invited her to come live with me for a few weeks. She arrived with just a small suitcase and a tin of homemade cookies. We sat together in my office, one hand holding a magnifying glass, the other cradling gemstones from a newly acquired Swiss collection. She smiled. You've learned how to read the soul of an item, not just assess its surface. That, not everyone can do. I moved into my new home on a hill overlooking Lake Mendota, on the outskirts of Madison in early March. The mid-century style villa, simple, private, yet filled with everything I needed. A jewelry vault with biometric security, a reading room with large glass windows looking out onto a pine forest, and a personal office with a soft yellow lamp like late autumn sunlight. I changed all my phone numbers, personal addresses, and instructed the receptionist not to admit anyone claiming to be family without an appointment. Not because I was heartless, but because I needed to redraw boundaries. And this time I held the pen. Some said I was harsh. Others called me cold. But I believe kindness isn't about letting people take advantage of you forever. Kindness is being able to say enough and knowing who deserves to step forward in your life. My career continued to thrive. In fact, after Ellie's half-veiled social media post, where she shared a photo of me holding her as a baby and wrote, "Not everyone with money has a heart," I gained a few more clients. A renowned designer invited me to appraise a personal jewelry collection for an exhibition in New York. A museum in Europe wanted to collaborate on restoring 18th century treasures. I expanded another branch in Atlanta, and for the first time, Aurum and Iris was nominated for an international award in the field of art asset appraisal. One Sunday morning, I sat by the second-floor window sipping black tea, watching my grandmother water the garden in her pale blue cardigan. I asked her, almost without thinking, "Are you proud of me?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked at me, eyes squinting in the sunlight, then softly said, "I'm proud that you didn't lose yourself, even when the whole world wanted you to forget who you are." I turned back to my desk, opened a deep blue velvet box, and took out the pale lavender swan-shaped brooch, the first piece of jewelry I ever adored when I was still a little girl sent away, just to stay out of the way. I placed it on the most prominent shelf in my personal gallery, with a handwritten card beneath it, for the little girl who was once forgotten, but in the end became the kind of light no one could ignore.